Welcome to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours, everyone. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and learning. I'm your host, David Nava. I'm a lead solution engineer at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. Each week, as you know, we invite a co-host, or in this case, co-hosts, to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, expertise, and unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session, other than Halloween and wearing costumes, is exploring the software engineer role and career path. So, if you've ever wondered what exactly a software engineer is and or does, this is the session for you. I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-hosts for tonight's session, Len Gagne and James McCormick. Len is a director of software engineering at Salesforce. He's been in the software development field for nearly 30 years, working with a variety of notable companies, including AutoZone, Radio Shack, Southwest, BNSF Railway, and of course, Salesforce. James is a senior manager of software engineering at Salesforce, and he's also been in the software development industry for a very long time, for 20 years, and has also worked at Radio Shack and BNSF Railway before making the move to Salesforce 3 years ago. It is great to have you both co-hosting Office Hours with me tonight. Welcome.
Thank you,
and if you could each take a moment to introduce yourself and kind of share your Salesforce story, that would be great. Len, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
You bet. Happy to.
Awesome. Thank you.
So as David mentioned, I've been here at Salesforce a little while, but it's going on 4 years, a little over 4 years now, which was, amazing to come here. But I started out, just about 30 years ago. I started out and, I've worked for the companies you talked about, Southwest Airlines, and most people haven't heard of that. That was an exciting 5 years. Worked for a railroad for like 13 years, so that was pretty fun. I programmed, that's where I started out in software engineering. I programmed in C and C++, in Java, Groovy, and Python. Obviously moving here to the Salesforce platform. And right in the middle of a reorganization, but right now I lead a large team of about 55 people, and it's pretty exciting. It's a very exciting place to work. It's an awesome environment. And I guess growing up, I was not military myself, but I grew up in a military family. My father was in the Air Force for 28 years. So the first all the way up through high school, I grew up living on Air Force bases. So I've been quite familiar with the military. So that's kind of my really brief journey of my software engineering and software technology career, and a little bit about my affiliation with the military.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing, Len. I'll go ahead and turn it over to James if you want to tell us your Salesforce story and a little bit about your background.
Hello, everyone. I'm James McCormick. I'm a senior manager here at Salesforce. I started in IT back in 1995 as basically a software developer. Throughout my career, I've held just about any role you can think of. I've done developer work in C, C++. I was a systems analyst, project manager, did a small stint as a scrum master. I've led teams of folks in remote areas as far as it goes, half the team here, half the team in India. And I spent my last piece, I helped architect a new system. So I got to work on some hardware and software for vision and image analytics systems. In 2019, I had the opportunity to join Salesforce, and it actually became my first role as a people leader. So up until 2019, everything I had done was an individual contributor role. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to come to work at Salesforce and lead a team of developers that do Force.com development. That's what I've been doing for the past 3 years here. I too was not in the military, but my grandfather actually was in the tank battalion that supported Patton in Africa. So I grew up hearing a lot of stories from Grandpa about that, and he actually was with some of the code talkers back in that day. So he actually had them within his units. And so it was always really cool to hear stories from that perspective. And then I had an uncle who served in the Air Force, and a brother-in-law in the Army, and a brother-in-law in the Navy. And that's where I kind of became an ally for Vet Force whenever I joined Salesforce, is just having that family history of the military and helping out, supporting where I can.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, James. And that's a great stories I'm sure you've had. My grandfathers both served as well in World War II. I've actually got my grandfather, my mother's side, flight jacket when he was an aviator. He flew seaplanes in World War II, scout planes. All right, so we will go ahead and cover some admin items, and then we'll jump right into it. So if you're joining for the first time, I always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours before we open the floor for questions and general discussion. These sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers as well as allies. Absolutely everyone is welcome to attend to explore primarily non-technical Salesforce career and branding related topics to help you achieve your professional development and career related goals. So for this next hour, this is your opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and both ask and answer questions from your perspective, which of course provides additional diversity of experience to the answers given and much more richer dialogue. Please do keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. I've already shared James and Len's LinkedIn profiles, and I'll be sharing a lot of other information as well, including knowledge articles, things from Salesforce Ben, employment opportunities, things of that nature. If you want to ask a question at any point during today's session, this is your session, so please feel free to do so. You can either post it in chat if you don't feel comfortable speaking up, or you can raise your hand and I will call on you or answer your question in chat in the order in which they are received. Finally, tonight's session is being recorded. So if you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, you want to share something that you don't want to appear on YouTube because it is recorded, please let me know before speaking and I will make sure that it's edited out of that final recording. Much easier to do on the front side than the back side. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Now, I have to admit, I don't have a complete understanding of what software engineers do on the day-to-day, so I kind of wanted to focus on that. And if you could both start off with kind of walking us through a typical week in the life of a software engineer. So, you know, from a team structure perspective, who you support, what activities you engage in, that would be great. I think that would set the groundwork for the questions to follow. Either one of you can go ahead and start us off.
You want to start off?
Yeah, I mean, sure, I can jump in. So all of the teams at Salesforce, we run on an agile methodology. And so what that is basically it's a team sizes typically between 8 and 10. And the theory and thought behind agile development methodology is you bring all your developers, your product owners, your product analysts into a single group, cohesive group. And what they do is they have a set of ceremonies that they basically go through on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and they operate on what's called the sprint cycle. And so as a software developer, part of that, you have daily meetings called daily stand-ups that you attend. There are also, daily stand-ups is probably a Salesforce specific term, but a stand-up or a scrum meeting is what it's called. It's a 15-minute meeting where everyone gives their updates. And so as a developer, each day you go in, you give an update on the stories that you're working on, and that's what happens in a 2-week sprint cycle is there's a group of work that you want to do. And so as that developer on a daily basis, you're working through that, and each day you attend those meetings. And when you're out of those meetings, you're either collaborating with other developers or getting development work done towards a story or a feature that you're trying to get done within your sprint cycle. And then each through those 2 weeks, there are other what they call ceremonies to go through, which include planning sessions and grooming sessions where you're looking and creating a group or backlog of work that you're working through. And that group of work is something where you have meetings where you go through and refine them and point them to figure out what sizes they are from sprint to sprint. But that's what you can usually expect as a developer. You're usually, and then varying levels to a developer, your developers with not a lot of experience will spend most of your time coding and doing those things and asking some of the higher up developers for help and reviews on your code. Your mid-level and your higher developers will start getting in and helping with the design of new features and things. Whenever something comes up, they're actually looking at the technical ways to develop and go. So I kind of started at the way bottom there as far as kind of what it's from. Lynn, what do you want to add on to it, man?
So yeah, I mean, typically about 80% of your day, we'll say, is really spent coding. There's a lot of communication that goes on. You spend a lot of time talking to the business, making sure, because on a team, you should have a representative from the business. So if you have questions about how is this supposed to work, well, they're a little ambiguous here. You get to talk to them, but you can code. There's a whole bunch of different languages. I mentioned a few of them I've worked in, so you'll do that. You do some of the, James talked about the design, the architecture, which is really like the software has so many different pieces. There are lots of pre-written libraries out there that you can use. You can put together in different ways. So an architect is going to say, you know what, these are the puzzle pieces that kind of is going to make this system work, and here's how you need them to put together, how you need to put them together, and then the software developer would fill in the gaps that you can't really, try to hook them together so that they work better as a cohesive unit. You get a lot of, you do get to talk to a lot of people. You talk to project managers, you talk to like I said, you talk to the business, you talk to users. So there's a whole lot of communication, a lot of coding, a lot of heads down time with the computer. I can tell you, there's been days when I'm coding and, you start at 8 o'clock and all of a sudden you look at the clock and it's like, oh my gosh, it's 2 in the afternoon. So it can be a pretty engaging, fun thing to do. It really is. If you like puzzles, if you like problem solving, that's what it really is all about. If you are good with logic, that's all it is. Because it's just syntax after that. How do I make the code do something? It's just, how do I solve this problem? So it's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know I don't code very well, but I will get heads down in a flow and spend hours there before realizing that I've bypassed my lunch and probably some other meetings as well. We've got a question from David. You got your hand raised for a question or comment.
Yeah, real quick, Lynn, I just wanted to ask, because you had mentioned that you talk to a lot of project managers and such, and we utilize the agile methodology, as you stated earlier, James. And my question was, do you use Scrum teams, and does that Scrum Master act as a good barrier between keeping the engineers focused and being able to kind of eliminate those outside distractions?
That's exactly what a Scrum Master is there for. So when you start a sprint, what we talked about, a 2-week cycle of work, basically. 2 or 3 weeks, however, it can vary from team to team. Once you commit to that work, that should be like, that is the amount of work I'm going to do. You shouldn't bring anything else in. And that Scrum Master is there to protect the team. If business users say, hey, I need this done, well, the Scrum Master is there. Yeah, we've already committed to work. You agreed to that priority. Let's put it in our backlog and consider that for next month. So yes, the Scrum Master is there to protect the team and make sure that they do what they're committed to, and that the other extra work doesn't get put in that shouldn't be put in.
Awesome. Thank you.
Did I answer your question? I want to make sure.
Definitely.
Okay. All right.
I was going to ask you about how you guys score projects, but I want to leave room for others to be able to ask some questions too here.
Yeah, no worries, David. Did you want to tackle that one, Len James?
Sure. How we do what?
Do your score when you're on the Scrum team, how you do the scoring for the projects and whatnot, so that you can get accurate like deadlines and make sure projects get done on time and whatnot.
So that's really interesting, because when you're looking at a software project, you have time and you have scope, right? So if they want a certain project to be done, let's say in 6 months, what you're going to have to do is be flexible on scope, because the requirements could be more difficult than you thought at first. They could be simpler, so you can get more scope in. There has to be flexibility there. If there's a certain scope that needs to be met, then the time needs to be flexible, because work just takes what it works, the time that it takes. And that's a hard message to deliver in the business sometimes, but that's why you have to be partners with the business and not order takers with the business. James?
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I hope my little friend up here doesn't distract you. He decided he wanted to sit on my lap for this.
Nope, everyone's welcome. We had a question in a chat here, and it was from Lori, just looking up there. Is it recommended to learn Scrum for developer careers? So I don't know, James and Len, if you've gone through Scrum training just to be more familiar with the process, or what you recommend in that regard.
I mean, it never hurts to get experience or training in and around Scrum. It's pretty easy to pick up from that perspective. But I mean, if there was a certification or something out there, yeah, it can be. And you learn some things in and around how the process works and stuff. And then also when you're building out or pointing a story, there's some things you can learn inside the training as far as trying to vote in on that. So I would recommend that. It's not required, but I would definitely recommend it.
So Scrum is just one flavor of Agile. So Agile is more a mindset, a philosophy on how to develop, and there's some structure around it. I put a link just out in the chat just now to the Agile Manifesto, which really kind of says, here's what that philosophy is. And that's what you want to really teach your developers is, what's that philosophy? What do we really care about? We care about working software, for instance, over comprehensive documentation, for instance. It doesn't mean we don't care about comprehensive documentation, but we care about the stuff on the left more than the stuff on the right, if you look at that website. So it really is a mindset. So what you want to do is adopt that mindset, and training around that kind of gels how you think about it. So it's good to get the training, but always remember that it's a mindset.
I appreciate the clarification. I also posted a trail from Trailhead that has some knowledge on Scrum and how that differs from Kanban, because there's more than one Agile methodology out there based upon what you're doing and how you want to organize your teams. So just a point of clarification, James and Lena, because we've talked about development and software engineering. What is the difference between, say, a software engineer and a developer? Is a software engineer a specific type of developer? And if so, how do you differentiate those two titles and roles?
Sorry, I had a dog that was a little unhappy with something going on out front. So no, to me, I mean, a software engineer developer, it's really a title. It's different companies have different names. I've been a software developer, a senior software developer, and then I've also been a software engineer. But really, it's going to wind up being the same type of work. Typically, it's just branded differently at different teams or different companies.
That makes sense. Moving on to some of the tools that you use. I know there's different IDEs that different developers use. What do you specifically use when you're creating code for projects, tools wise? I'm sure there's more than one.
So as far as one of the things, as far as in a Salesforce perspective, a lot of our developers use Visual Code, which is a free tool from Microsoft. We have some folks that use IntelliJ. What I would say, as far as in the Salesforce development space, there's a lot of Visual Code, and there's good components you can add on that help with syntax and things along that lines for that.
That's a big one. And when you're looking at the broader software market, IntelliJ is a huge one. I think they have a free version, Eclipse, which I just posted a link to in the chat. Is a huge integrated development environment that's out there in the world as well. And that's very popular. There's different flavors of it depending on how you want to develop. Some of our developers use that as well. But typically an IDE, they do all about the same thing, right? They help you with your formatting. They do code completion for you. You can usually run snippets of your code. So they're very helpful as far as those kind of things go.
Awesome. I'm just putting in the what the acronym stands for. And I just spelled it wrong, but that's okay. I think you get the point. Iris had a question in chat, and she asks, or says rather, a lot of us are a little intimidated with the developer route. It seems like a lot. I think most of us like to think we're problem solvers, but what is a skill that you think is essential for a developer? So I guess I would guess a non-technical skill, Iris, like a soft skill. Okay, she's nodding yes.
I mean, that problem-solving mindset for one thing, right? I mean, that to me, being able to see a problem and absorb what's in there and look for a solution, that would be one. But good communication skills. You have to be able to if you read a story and you see a story, you have to be able to ask those questions and ask clear questions whenever you have them. Or two of the things, I guess, when looking at soft skills that I would say are good things to have.
And one of the big ones I would say is don't get intimidated, because really, if you have problem solving skills, that's all it really is. What are the discrete steps I take to do something? So if you get a huge problem, it's like the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You have to take that bigger problem and break it down to smaller problems. And that's all it is. So if somebody gives you something, you need to do this, and it's like, oh my gosh, that is going to be impossible. You just take it, break it down to small problems, break it down to small steps. And all the code is it's just very structured way to tell the computer what to do. But it's not, once you learn one language, they're all pretty easy because they're all about the same. There's only so many ways you can do it. And so, don't be intimidated by that. Learn one that's kind of friendly to you. And then if they all fall into place, as long as you have that, I can solve this puzzle mentality and break a big problem into a bunch of small problems.
All right, problem solving and communication. Thanks very much. We've got another question in chat from Denisha. She asks, what are your thoughts, strategy, recommendations on someone entering the Salesforce software engineering pathway without a traditional computer science degree?
Yeah, so Trailhead, that's really where it's at. The content that out there, in fact, our developers use Trailhead. Whenever they wind up, our developers jump from team to team to team, and when they jump on something, they may jump into Lightning Web Components. The first thing they do is open up Trailhead and look for a component or a trail to use on that. So going through Trailhead, you can also prepare for different sets of certifications, admin, developer 1, developer 2 certifications through Trailhead to learn and get involved in the environment.
Yep, I agree. That's one big way to do it. And that'll get you, and make sure, because it's all about networking. That's what a lot of this finding, careers is all about, especially, at Salesforce. It's very network heavy. So what you want to do is get on LinkedIn, connect with those people, find some recruiters out there, or find somebody that knows recruiters that work for Salesforce and say, hey, I know we connected. Can you help me with a recruiter? Hook me up with a recruiter, because that recruiter can say, here's the skill sets I'm looking for. Here's how you can polish up your resume. I mean, their whole job is finding candidates. It is finding candidates to succeed in Salesforce. And so if you just, like James said, go to True Trailhead, get yourself some credentials, some certifications, and then get that networking going with people on LinkedIn that are inside of Salesforce, the recruiters in there, they can help you out. And we do have people on our team that came from alternative backgrounds, so you can definitely do that.
I'm going to share in chat. Those are great points. This is Brooks Johnson's YouTube channel. Brooks, I believe, is an Army veteran, self-taught coder. Now he teaches others to code on YouTube. So, Denisha, if you're interested, take a look at that. He's someone that's done it, and to Len's point, others out there have done it as well. So don't be discouraged. We'll go ahead and move on. So I know I wanted to talk about some of the challenges you face, but not necessarily coding challenges. Obviously, solving a sticky code problem is something you do every day, but more focused on maybe some of the dynamics of being on a team, and any challenges you may have faced between internal team or the internal to the customer team, because you'll have to obviously work with a customer team if you're on a project-based, if you're working in a project-based environment. So what are some of those, I guess, personal challenges, if you will?
So I would say with the business, one of the big challenges is they don't know what they want sometimes. They have a rough idea. I want something to, so okay, I'll give you an idea. So you all know trains, everybody knows a train. You've all gone by crossings and you see a train that's sitting off to the side waiting, when you go to a crossing. Well, business comes and says, I want a system that tells me, is that train going to sit in the siding, or is a different train going to sit in the siding? That's a system I work on. Unbelievably complex, but really they don't know quite what they want. They don't know how to do it. So they might say, I want it to do this. And you can look at them and say, you know what, if you want that particular way to work, that's going to take you 6 months. That's going to take me 6 months. I can say, I can offer you this alternative, which is really close to what you want. It's going to take me 6 weeks. So what you have to do is not go through, as far as interacting with them, you can't go through as an order taker, right? You're not a waiter, which, I was a waiter for school. So I know what that's, I was in school, so I know what that's like, but you're not an order taker for them. You've got to be their partner. So that mindset that you want to have is a partner mindset, because you've got to bring value to them. And that value can be, you understand what technology can do, so you can help them make those business decisions by giving them good alternatives. So really that interpersonal communication is be their partner, right? And if you go through constructively, don't say no. Never say no. Say, here's an alternative I can do for you. Here's what I can make work that's really close to what you want. So always have that looking forward, opportunistic mindset, and be a partner with them, is what I would say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Be the trusted advisor in the relationship. All right, I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about how you measure success in this role. So, I mean, you're coding every day as an individual contributor. How do you, beyond writing good code, how do you measure success in that role and move up?
So it's Salesforce. It's a little bit different than I'd say it was at other places that I've been at. But one, yeah, the day-to-day coding and consistent delivery is one, but also being sure that you experience the whole Salesforce as a whole. So giving back to the community, following the 1-1-1 model, being involved or an ally to a group. It's other things. What else are you doing just besides that software development work, right? And getting that done. It's how are you doing that? Are you mentor, mentee? Those type things would be things that go into those considerations, or that you're looking into. So don't just always kind of focus in the one place. Always try to branch out and do other things and network and take advantage of other programs would be something I'd look for.
Yeah, that makes sense. Len and James, what are some things that you're doing kind of outside your immediate coding role to give back, or to to be that standout software engineer?
So, we do VTOs. We have a relationship with a couple of food banks in Dallas that we go to. I'm on Veterati. I'm on that site that I'm available as a mentor. I do that. I really enjoy that. I've gone to, they do have a urban farms that we've gone to help folks. They're growing in the city, and that was really pretty awesome. Good to do that. We've gone where they have the equine, where they have for folks in the military that are kind of have PTSD, and for young kids that can ride horses that kind of help them. It's just kind of a therapy kind of a thing. So we've gone out to help clean that up. So there's a whole ton, which is great. James mentioned the equality groups. I've been a member of Gen Force. We have Ability Force, Vet Force, obviously, that we're trying to help a little bit out here with. There's tons and tons and tons of ways that you can help give back, and all of these folks help organize these volunteer events that we go to as teams. So it really, there's a ton of ways you can give back.
And then additionally, from a developer perspective, we have quite a few developers. Salesforce, part of that is giving away 1% of the product. Well, when an organization gets and stands up an instance of Salesforce, they may not have the development group to actually do that. And so our developers have the opportunity to go in and volunteer for a pro bono work. And so you can go in and help. So example, the food bank Lynn was talking about, we actually had a couple of our developers that helped them build out their Salesforce instance to help speed up the check-in process for people coming to help for assistance. So pro bono is another way one, and then innovation work as well. So new ideas and things that you come up with that you may want to try out within the system, or a new product comes out, you can pitch that as an innovation idea and see if you can actually get that adopted as a Salesforce standard.
All right.
I see one more question in the comments.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm gonna jump in on Vivian. So under good agile practices, you should be working on one project or one scrum team at a time, as far as that goes. And so you may have some of your lead members of technical staff or your architects, your hire people that may work across too, but typically it should be one project that you're working on. Tips on ramping up, especially if you're involved with multiple engagements. Typically new projects, if you've been on a team for a while, you have a good idea of what that system is and what that project's going to be. New teams that you roll in on, there's usually KT documentations and different things along that lines to get you started and up and running on a team or a project.
So I just put a link out there to Marc Valer. He has some really good tips on Agile. Marc Valer is pretty much the leading authority on Agile software development in the world. So I just put a link to his website out there. So there's a lot of good reading there.
Awesome. Thank you. And great question, Viviana. Thanks very much for that. All right. So we were talking about it prior to, but what are some, again, at that macro level, what are some interesting projects you've been on, maybe industries, general customers, or what are some interesting things that you've built that maybe was a one-off and just you found it really neat? Just to kind of dig into some of your work.
All right, I can tell you about one. So railroads are a huge logistical nightmare, quite frankly. I worked for Southwest Airlines for 5 years, and then for a railroad, and quite frankly, a railroad is harder to run than an airline, because if you have planes coming towards each other, they can go up, down, side, they can do anything. Railroads, man, you get tracks. They're going where those tracks tell them to go. So that's a tough one. And one of the last systems I worked on, so when crews ride on a train, they can only work a certain number of hours. So they're just like pilots. FAA says you can only work this number of hours. There's a thing called the FRA that say train crews, and there's two folks on a train, an engineer and a conductor. They can only work a certain number of hours. And if those hours get up, if they reach those hours, it's what they call they die. That's the railroad has a lot of weird lingo. They say they die, which means they can't work anymore. Wherever that train is, it doesn't matter. It could be right in the middle of nowhere. That train has to stop right where it is, because they're not allowed to work anymore. And so the railroad will spend over $100 million a year to go out, send vans out to get those crews and to take them to a hotel for rest and to bring another crew out there. That's a huge logistical problem in itself, because you've got to go all these crazy places. There's more than one van vendor. There's, I think, 3 or 4 major ones that we use. And you don't want to just send one van out for every crew, because you can optimize the route, sort of like the famous traveling salesman's problem. You've got to go different ways to get them. Huge logistical problem. So I worked on that system, and it's a big integration problem. We had to integrate with all the sources on the railroad to know, so many sort. I always say coding is easy, integration is hard. We had to integrate with mainframes. We had to integrate with Department of Energy. We had to integrate with the van vendors. We had to integrate with all those things to try to figure out how to get this system. We had a vendor that took care of all of it for us, but they did a really poor job. We paid them a ton of money to do it. They didn't do it very well, so we took that in-house, built it to where it was more efficient. And I think the first year that it was in production, it saved like $20 million for the railroad. So that's quite a big savings, quite an interesting. Like I said, it's a huge system. It was really fun. Had a great team. And what's even great, and this is the thing I talk about networking, right? A couple of those team members, when I came to Salesforce, they came with me shortly thereafter. So always keep that network. That was a really interesting problem.
Yeah, I was guessing that James might have been one of those folks that came with you, since you both were at BNSF Railway.
He came shortly thereafter, but he wasn't on that team. But
Gotcha.
Yeah. Ironically, we never, in 13 years, we never worked together at BNSF. But
that's weird.
I knew Lynn, but we just worked in different areas from that perspective. Yep. I've got two examples I'll give you. So one of the things you're going to find as a software engineer, whenever you go in, is that you rarely get to work on something brand new, like Lynn talked about, where you're building a brand new system from the ground up. Most of the time, you're enhancing an older system or adding on to it or things along that lines. And so, in one of the interesting projects I worked on back at Radio Shack, the now defunct and gone, was they wanted to upgrade their point of sale systems. So I don't know, does anybody know what HEB grocery stores are if you're here in Texas? Well, the point of sale systems that you go and you buy your groceries add up on those big monitors that you see going like that. The folks at Radio Shack went out and actually bought that system from a company out of Florida. They said, hey, we're going to make that work for an electronics store. And so we had the fortune of trying to integrate, as Lynn said, right? The integrations are hard. And so we had to integrate it with our systems to make it work and talk and actually start understanding and learning and knowing what an electronics company or electronics group did. And so we had a long partnership with that company of where we built shared objects that leveraged APIs that they exposed to us over those times. So they basically had programs that would tell us, hey, these are the 5 things you need to tell me in order for it to call in the information and display it on the screen. And so it was an interesting time. It was a fun time. There were some random things as we were going through. You would randomly get a banana coupon whenever you sold a battery. So 25 cents off bananas. We finally figured that out and got to put it out. But that was an interesting project that I did. We were able to actually roll it out to 5,000 Radio Shack stores after about three years worth of development. And so that's something where it was an existing system that we're building and bolting onto. And then the last system that I did, I think that was probably the most fun at the railroad, is I helped build a vision and image analytics system where we actually took and manufactured out of our group in Topeka. They manufactured a beam that had high-speed cameras on it. And so as the train is traveling down the up to 70 miles an hour down the tracks, it's taking pictures down of the tracks. And as we captured those images, we built a back-end system in C that did analytics on what it was seeing. So it would piece together hundreds of photos it's going across, and we were looking for different defects within the rail. For example, 2 pieces of rail get tied together, what they call a joint bar, and those can get cracked. And when one of those cracks and breaks as the train's going across, the rail pops up and the train derails. So the goal of that system was to go and look for different things that might cause derailments throughout the system. And so we back-ended that to where they were actually able to capture and send the information back to corporate headquarters and alert people within 15 seconds of finding a defect. So that was probably the most fun that I had because I not only got to help build it from kind of the ground up, but got to go out and actually ride out on the rails and see it working. So that was a lot of fun.
One of the most fun things about the software industry is you think, it's a huge industry, right? But it's a small community. It's crazy. And that's one of the great things about Salesforce, so many customers. As we talked about, I worked at Southwest Airlines, and they're one of Salesforce customers. And so I had the opportunity, they wanted some consulting done. I got the opportunity to go, and I hadn't been to the Southwest headquarters for, it had to have been, 15 years. I had the opportunity to go talk to their CIO because we were doing a little consulting for him. And so as a Salesforce representative going to Southwest Airlines, which I used to work with, and the CIO I was talking to used to work at BNSF Railroad. So huge industry. It's a small community, right? Just tying together a lot of my career there.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing those stories. I wanted to touch on a little bit kind of work management. So you mentioned earlier it's very easy to get heads down and you start at 8 and you look up and it's 2 o'clock and you've been working on this really cool coding problem set. But what do you do to manage work-life balance, which I imagine when you're on a project or you're working a specific tricky issue can be challenging? What are some things that you do and some tips you might pass on?
So I can tell you, first of all, I'm going to tell you, David, I hate the phrase work-life balance. I think it's backwards. I think it should be life-work balance is how it should be said, simply because your life comes first. I always say it that way. And really, you just have to be very deliberate about it. We give our folks wellness days. Once every month, we get an extra day off, just have wellness days. I always tell the developers on the team, it's like, you got to make sure you take care of your life. If you got to take care of kids, take care of kids, because you have a happy team that if you take care of your people first, the productivity will be a byproduct of that. If you just worry about get this done, and always write people do that, they're not going to be as productive. They're not going to be as happy. So I always stress, and my whole team will tell you, life-work balance is how it should be. Take care of the person. When I do one-on-ones with my folks, half the time I spend talking to them about, the garden they planted out in the house, or what their kids are doing at school, what their vacation is going to be like, because you want to understand and know that person is a total person, not just as a resource. They're not a resource, they're a person. And if you understand what they like, what makes them happy, then you can be a part of that, and really they're going to be more motivated to do a good job. So that's kind of my philosophy.
I like that life-work balance. Go ahead, James.
It's hard to tack onto that because I work for Lynn and we share a lot of the same philosophies from that perspective, right? So what he talks about and says, I also live and push with my team. But as a developer, when you're struggling with that, you have to be, as he said, deliberate. And what you have to be deliberate about is setting yourself up with breaks. Own your calendar is another thing that we talk about. So putting deliberate breaks into your calendar so that you and you get reminded to get up and go and get away for 15 minutes. Don't sit at your desk. And I did it the first probably month of the pandemic. I took every day where I sat in front of my desk and ate my lunch. And then it finally got to me. Why am I feeling drained? I'm feeling drained because I basically have 8 to 10 hours worth of screen time a day. Don't have your lunch here. Especially if you're working from home, get up and walk away. Same thing at the office, right? Don't eat your lunch at your desk. Eat it in the break room. Go there, but get away and be deliberate about taking your time off. And so those are kind of some of the pointers for how I manage, even me as a people leader, manage it that way. But as a developer, because you can get heads down, but you just have to be deliberate about taking that time off and planning it. There should be plenty of time within you're not expected. When your allocation for a sprint's never 100% 40 hours worth of work for 2 weeks. It should always be less than that, so you have time for those other things in yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's funny because I think if you don't work from home like I do, if you don't work remotely, you might assume that, if you work remotely, you have tons of free time and you can set your work-life balance. But for me, I tend to work more when I work from home. So I have to be especially careful of my life-work balance. And to your point, James, take those micro breaks where I just leave the desk and go walk around the block or, grab a drink of water or something just to get away from it and come back to it. It also helps in my problem solving. It gives the brain a chance to rest, but very valuable. We had a question in chat and Tim was looking at Lynn's LinkedIn profile and is asking if you had any Salesforce certifications. And I guess the underlying question is, can you be successful as a developer in Salesforce without going through and getting your PD1, PD2, and the other related certs?
You can, and that's what I talked about before. Hex especially is very similar to Java. Actually, it's like 5 to 8 year old Java. They took out some of the primitives, but it's very similar. And a lot of my background was Java, and so it's really similar to that. I am a 2-star ranger, which when you get X amount of points doing trails, they give you like swag and you get the stars and stuff like that. So I'm a 2-star ranger. I'm pretty good with Apex, but it really is, like I said, once you know one language, the rest of them all are really not that different. And so that's what's important. And being a people leader, I plan on getting some certifications, but it's pretty busy time sometimes. So I've just got to make that time to do it.
Gotcha. I wanted to talk, kind of move away from the specific role and just talk in general. What made each of you choose software engineering at the beginning of your career, and what has kept you there? What were your underlying motivations?
Wow. So I was a freshman in high school. I mean, I'm going to date myself. I may as well. And I took my first class, and it was one of those, you're a freshman and you're doing these quarterly things. And one of them was in a thing where you got to go into this computer lab and write little programs in Logo. And what Logo was, is it was simple geometric instructions where this little triangle went across the screen and would draw a triangle if you gave it instructions. And that kind of piqued my interest. And I got lucky enough at the school I was at that they got a bunch of old IBM 8088 computers, and we were given an extra credit assignment to write a program in BASIC. So, they showed us a little bit of it, and I went home that night and I wrote down on a piece of legal paper the program to solve the problem that the teacher gave us. I was hooked. And so from then on, I was absorbing and taking as much as I could as far as it went in the programming world. And I knew then that that's what I would go to high school for and get after it. I love it. I love it from the problem solving aspect. I love it from the aspect of being able to create something just with lines of code. So it's just kind of always been a passion. I did think I would always be in the technical side of it though, but I finally got to a point where I figured out that I've learned enough on the technical side, and maybe jumping over to a leadership role where I can help guide and teach would be a good way to kind of finish out my career. So I mean,
that passion is very evident when you talk about it. That's very cool. What about you, Len?
So I love video games. My wife loves video games. She says she's a geek. She says I'm a true geek. I know when I was a kid, I had like a programmable Texas Instruments calculator that I used to, program games on and stuff like that. So I've always liked it. At first, when I went to college, I was going to major in math. But I couldn't quite figure out how I was going to make money with that. But I loved the pureness of it. And then I thought, well, computer science, because that's really pure in my mind too. I don't know why that, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's how I thought about it. And so I love the puzzles. I love the problem solving, and that fit in right with my passion for that. So I think my inner geek just absolutely loves it. And that's what just kind of sparks me through the career, because I've always had such that passion for it. It goes with playing games. I just love those kind of things. Games are all about problem solving. Coding is all about problem solving. Managing a team is all about problem solving. It's harder problems because people are variable. Computers, you tell them what to do, they just do it. So a lot more challenging. It makes it kind of fun.
That's interesting, because that was kind of my lead into Salesforce as well. Not so much from a code perspective, but it was that problem solving that got me hooked, where I love process. And so if I can create a process or fix a process and interact with a piece of software to do that, so much the better. And that's what I kind of found in Trailhead, the ability to solve those problems and fix those processes in that way. So that's when I was hooked. So I can definitely identify with that. I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about, so James, you had mentioned kind of, you'd started out as an individual contributor, as did you, Len, and then you moved to management. And so for those folks that maybe, and it doesn't necessarily have to just be in software development, it could be really any technical field where you're initially an individual contributor and you're thinking about moving up to management, which is something that I've thought about as well. How do you, and listening to you talk about how it's been your passion for so long, how do you accept the trade-off that you invariably are faced with when you realize that, if you go to management, yes, you can mentor and you can look after your folks, which is phenomenal, but you don't get to be as hands-on as you used to be, and you don't get to spend hours coding. And so how do you come to terms with that trade-off, I guess is my question.
So when I first made the leap, I did a lot of stuff in Trailhead. It was really where it was. I mean, it's a place where I could get I could still get that coding thing. There's a problem to solve out there, and then, hey, I get a badge on top of it whenever I get it right. So, it's kind of gamified from that perspective. I'm also just a geek at heart. So you find projects to do here and around the house. I've got a Raspberry Pi in there, and I'll install, the latest version of Debian on there and check out the latest version of Python on there. I I worked on a mobile game for a while, and so that was really the ways that I took care of it is just doing those type of things and going, and it's I would say it's ebbed over the last probably year and a half. It was that first probably year to 16 months where I was really itching, and I turned to Trailhead. I mean, that was a lot of fun doing that from that perspective, or just, tinkering or projects around the house.
So I know as an individual contributor, right, it was kind of cool, like working for AutoZone. And probably still to this day, if you go buy something, it probably goes through some code I wrote. If you go fly on Southwest Airlines, those pilots probably bid on the flight they're flying through some code I wrote. So it's kind of cool to make a difference. You can see the difference you make. And as you get further along in your career, say as a technical leader, as an architect, kind of roles I've done as well, you're making a difference across multiple systems, which is really cool. So it really is, what kind of impact can you make? And then, you start to think as a leader, it's like, these are still puzzles, but the puzzles just change a little bit. It's like, how can I help these people in their career, which really makes a huge impact. So you get to still solve puzzles. How do I put people in a position to succeed? How do I help this person, really fulfill what they want to do? So you still get that problem solving satisfaction, and you get to make such a difference because you see people that you've helped, people you've mentored, people that you're learning from, because you learn something from everybody that you work with, just making a big difference. So really, to me, it's like, where can I make that impact? Where can I help make things better? And as a people leader, I still get that problem solving feeling, but you get to make such a huge impact that I love that.
It's interesting. So you're not necessarily giving up your passions. You're just finding a different way to reframe how you approach that passion. And I can definitely identify with that. Appreciate that perspective. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to move on to talking about kind of getting started. So, folks out there that may be watching this live or later on YouTube are often transitioning into the ecosystem and looking for, a path. What would be some things that you would do for someone that doesn't maybe have the computer science background, doesn't have a technical degree, but is very interested in problem solving, wants to become a software engineer or developer? How could they get started? What languages, what resources, what would you do if you were to chart your course kind of all over again in today's day and age?
There's tons of free resources out there. You can probably the most prevalent language out there, most in demand commercially, is Java. So that's a great place to start. Eclipse is a free IDE that's out there. And there's tons of free coding academies you can go to help with that. And once you learn those basics, you're really going to be well equipped, like when you go into Trailhead there. And then you start doing some, for instance, like we were talking about Apex trails, you're like, oh, this is just about what I've already learned before. So it's really just the idea of go out there, make little projects for yourself, get some of those free resources, and just dig in if you want to do that. And also, if you really like problem solving and you want to get in the software industry, but you don't quite want to do the coding, there's business analysts and those kind of roles as well, where you still get to do those problem solving things, but you're not actually coding. You're trying to analyze a problem and help the programmers understand it, connect with the users. So there's different paths depending on how deep you want to get into the actual code, or if you want to be more, like I said, in the analyst kind of role.
Okay, gotcha. What about you, James? What are some of your tips?
So yeah, I think Lynn hit it right. I mean, JavaScript is another big one. So web development, front end development, from that perspective, those lots of, like I said, lots of free resources. In the past, I've used Pluralsight. It is a paid tool, but I have used that. I've used YouTube for some of the things whenever I wanted to learn a new language. And then in the Salesforce platform, obviously, is Trailhead is a good place to start as far as getting in and the things to learn and go from that perspective.
Awesome. John had a question in chat here. He asked, is there an ideal certification stack for a developer?
Yeah, and I pulled up a spreadsheet of certifications whenever I saw that question in there. So definitely the admin one's a good one to have. Platform developer 1, platform developer 2 are two good ones to have. There's also a new one, a JavaScript certification developer one that's a good one to have. But I would probably put those off as kind of the top handful to go after first.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think as we all know, most jobs want you to have that work experience before they'll hire you, which becomes a chicken or the egg type of problem, where how can you get work experience if no one will hire you without work experience? What are your thoughts on kind of developing a portfolio of code to be able to kind of do a show and tell or a demo? How can you show that you have work experience, so to speak, without actually having had a job as a developer to get your foot in the door?
Yeah, that's so, it's interesting. Hiring managers. So how long do y'all think a hiring manager looks at a resume? What's the average amount of time? You can Google it so you know I'm not lying.
I would guess probably 6-7 seconds.
Six, I think, is the average, is about the right answer, 6 seconds. And so really, I remember looking at one guy's resume that we hired, and he'd been a director at other places. And he went back to be an individual contributor. And he had links on his resume. He had URLs on his resume to websites that he had done, right? And so I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive, because the guy was the leader. He decided he wanted to do hands-on coding again. When you went and looked at it, it was pretty impressive looking. So like you just said, that portfolio he had of things he had done, so he had network, he had the recruiter, and then he had put that on his resume. And always make sure that your resume is ordered correctly, right? If you've been in the industry for 20 years, like I don't even know if my college is on there anymore. They don't care anymore. It's irrelevant to them, right? But if you're just getting out of school, that should be first. So if you're looking, to get a job and you don't have that typical background, you want to highlight the skills that you have and that portfolio that David mentioned first thing on there. So when they glance at that resume, that's what they see first. You don't want to bury that last. That's what they should see first. So make sure that's highlighted the very first thing. That's so important, because unfortunately, people don't look at resumes long. They glance. 6 seconds is what you get. So make sure it's impactful, and do what he said. Have those on there, because I'm looking for people that are smart. I hired some QEs, right? Some quality engineers that they needed to know automation. I didn't care if they knew the Salesforce platform. I think I hired 4 or 3 of them had never worked on the Salesforce platform. I didn't care. I wanted smart people. So show that you're smart. Show that portfolio. Show that you can do it, and then get that interview. All the resumes for us to get you an interview. Once you have that interview, then you can really show them what you're made of. So that's what's important, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. The URLs to the websites is an interesting touch. Anything you wanted to add, James, onto that?
No, we follow the same philosophies from that perspective. So.
All right. Well, I'm looking for a link here on Trailhead, because there's a brand new development badge out, and I wanted to put that in chat really quick. Here it is. Let me just paste that in chat. So if you're interested in getting started, this is one that came out on Trailhead. It's project-based, and it will provide you with a kind of a look at development. I haven't done it yet, but I'm excited to give it a shot this weekend. So there's that. All right, and we're pretty much out of time here, folks. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Before we do close, I wanted to thank Len and James very much for spending time out of your daily busy schedule to come educate us on software engineering and share your expertise and your knowledge with us. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. It was awesome. I appreciate all the questions, and we're happy to help out.
Awesome. And thank you to all of you for spending time on your Wednesday. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, James. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, our pleasure. And I was just going to say thanks to all of you for spending time on your Wednesday to learn about software engineering. Please join us next week. And in the meantime, have a safe and happy Halloween and a great weekend.